Welcome back to Law and Crime. I'm Ashley Willcott. I'll be your host for the next hour. I'm glad that you're joining us. And right now we are going to listen to our top crime stories.
Here are today's top crime stories trending on lawandcrime.com and across the country. Authorities in Los Angeles released video of the terrifying moments a suspect shot an officer at point-blank range during a traffic stop. The suspect, 32-year-old Richard Mendoza, was pulled over during a routine traffic stop when the unidentified female officer asked him to step out of the vehicle. That's when all hell broke loose. The female officer apparently knew Mendoza through her previous work with the LAPD gang unit. Mendoza died later at a nearby hospital after being shot multiple times in the head and torso. The officer suffered a gunshot wound to the leg and is expected to recover. A man in Florida was arrested after he was caught on a Ring doorbell camera approaching his neighbor's front door armed and wearing a bulletproof vest. 48-year-old Kevin Flaherty can be seen haphazardly approaching his neighbor's door carrying a rifle. The police were initially hesitant to arrest Flaherty, stating no crime had occurred, but changed their mind and took him into custody the next day. Flaherty now faces 3 counts of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon without intent to kill. The New Jersey couple who allegedly raised $400,000 for a homeless man on GoFundMe will likely face charges for mismanagement of the funds, according to their attorney. The feel-good story began with the homeless man, Johnny Bobbitt, giving Caitlin McClure $20 after she was stranded on Interstate 95 in Philadelphia in 2017. To thank his kindness, McClure and her boyfriend, Mark D'Amico, started a GoFundMe page which raked in over $400,000. Bobbitt alleges the couple used the funds as a personal piggy bank and sued them after only receiving $200,000 of the money. Prosecutors confirmed the couple are under criminal investigation. Those were today's top crime stories. I'm Anthony Velez for Law and Crime.
Well, let's talk about that last story, GoFundMe. How many of us have not given money on GoFundMe to some specific cause that we support, believe in, or read about, quite frankly, on Facebook and say, hey, this is something we're going to contribute to. So what about this? This homeless man gives $20, the last money he has, so she can get gas in her car. This couple raises over $400,000, almost $500,000, and now he's claiming that they did not give all of the money to him. I am pleased to introduce as our guest today, Joseph Scott Morgan. Share with us, if you would, what are your thoughts on this case?
Well, it's astonishing. I don't know if you recall this, but about a year or so ago, well, less than a year ago, a tornado ripped through our town, ripped through our university here at Jacksonville State University, and literally destroyed our home here. Just took it down to the ground. And I had friends that set up a GoFundMe account for my family. We literally lost everything, Ash. And it was such a groundswell. And we were so grateful for everything that people had done for us. And it was really done from the heart. And as a person that is a direct recipient of a GoFundMe page, when I heard about this, that they were gaming this at the expense of this poor man who, you and I have many times, I'm sure, borne witness to the homeless in large cities. I've worked cases as an investigator relative to them. They have nothing. They have nothing whatsoever. And the fact that they would take advantage of this poor man is just absolutely, I don't have enough moral indignation to go around about this. It's absolutely horrible.
Joe Scott, I remember specifically when that happened to you and you all did lose anything. And the thing I like about your sharing that personal story with all of our viewers today is that it leads credence to the fact that most of the times GoFundMe, these causes are for the right reasons, for the good reasons. It restores faith in people. I think everything that you and I do in our work lives, I know as a judge in juvenile court, and I know the work that you certainly do with forensics, we see the outliers, the worst of the worst. And so I think and hope this is an example of the worst of the worst, but generally GoFundMe is for good purposes and helping people. Would you agree or not?
Yeah, I think that it was. And, the other thing that it does for people that are on the outside looking in, so many times people sit back and say, what can I do? And folks have been scammed over the years. They see things on television. They think they're going to be scammed. This is something that you have direct impact with your dollars. And so when people sit there and they think, wow, I could really help this guy out. This is something I'd like to get involved in. I know where my money is going toward. And then these two come along and essentially pick a poor man's pocket in regards to this. It's outrageous.
You know, it really is. And I think the other part of this is it's like anything in life, full disclosure and full honesty. If they said on GoFundMe, hey, we're raising money, but we're going to keep this portion for us or do this with this amount of the money, then it's a whole different ballgame, right? Because those giving know exactly where the money's going. It reminds me of a lot of nonprofits. As we well know, some nonprofits, all of the money that goes to them goes directly to services. Some nonprofits goes to administration, overhead, large CEO salaries, but those have to disclose that. So I think, too, if we had some honesty around what these couples intended to do with the money, then it wouldn't be an issue.
Yeah, you're right. I got to tell you, just as an aside, again, thank you for just letting me speak to this. But for my family and I, you know, we give money at our church and all these other things that we're involved in, but we have seen the direct impact that this had on our life. And we know that in the event that if something horrible happens, I'm thinking of the folks in North Carolina right now that are kind of in the bullseye. I can guarantee you we'll start giving money to GoFundMe accounts because of the impact that it had on our lives.
Excellent. Thank you again for sharing that information with us and the impact it did have on your lives. So we are going to return now. It is the Iowa versus Stanley Liggins. This is the case of the horrible murder of the 9-year-old girl. The defendant has been tried twice before. Those convictions were overturned. This is a 1990 crime 28 years ago. We are going to return to the testimony of Antonio Holmes. He was in the liquor store, and his testimony goes to the fact that he had seen the victim on the day that she was murdered. Let's return to that testimony now.
The person that you saw outside of Max Liquor at that table?
Yes.
And what sort of eyewear is he wearing?
Dark sunlight.
And if that's who you saw outside of Max Liquor on September 17th, 1990?
Yes.
Was there anyone with him?
No.
Had you ever seen him before?
No.
Did you go into the store?
Yes.
And when you went into the store, was Charlotte there?
Yes.
She was working behind the counter?
Yes.
Was there anyone else there?
There was a little girl in front of me.
And there's a little girl at the counter?
Yes.
And what do you remember about the little girl?
She had dark hair and she was getting some shampoo.
Do you remember anything about what she was wearing?
I believe it was like a light colored top, but that's about it.
Okay. And then did the little girl leave?
Yes.
You picked out your cord, or
Well, I had to get it from her.
it's all behind the counter?
Yes.
All right. So you walked up to Charlotte and did what you intended to do, and that was buy a quart of beer.
Right.
Then did you leave?
Yes.
And when you went outside, did you see the little girl?
No.
And did you see the man sitting at this table anymore?
No.
What did you do?
Got in the car and left.
So that is the testimony of Antonio Holmes. Again, he saw the victim at the liquor store buying gum. That is his eyewitness testimony. I'd like to bring back in our guest, Joseph Scott Morgan, and talk to you about 1990 and all of the evidence that was collected in 1990 versus if that crime happened today in 2018, would the actual collection of evidence be different in your opinion? Not necessarily the DNA testing. We know that would be very, very different today. But in terms of the actual collection of evidence, do you think it would differ that much?
Yeah, historically, I'd have to say in my particular profession, the Simpson case was a benchmark for us. It's like everything changed after that. Prior to that case, we became a lot more particular. Our methodologies improved, I think, exponentially. Of course, that was more in larger jurisdictions where that occurred. I can't necessarily say that about more rural landscapes. However, procedurally, we have refined our systems a little bit more now. But this still holds true even back then. You want to collect as much as you possibly can, make it viable. And one of the things that I really, and I've said this before, I try to emphasize to my students is the fact that you are de facto a historian, not just an investigator. You're trying to hold on to things that are going to paint a picture for those that aren't around yet. You know, who would have thought back in 1990 when they worked this case that this thing would be going through the court system again in 2018? And that's really kind of a weighty issue when you begin to think of it. Most of us think about these things coming to trial pretty quickly. This thing has had to pass through the courts 3 times, Ash, 3 times now, and that's a heck of a microscope for anybody to have to go under.
Sure, absolutely. So we are going to rejoin this trial live, and this again is Iowa versus Stanley Liggins in live testimony. This is the criminologist. That's the 3rd time today I've struggled with that word. Apparently I need to learn what to call him. And criminalist, and he is testifying as to the evidence collected. Let's tune in. So we are listening live to the defense question the criminalist in this case, and it's fascinating to me because they're really honing in on a specific piece, and that is whether or not they focused on Mr. Williams as the person of interest from the get-go. And as I understood the chronological timeline that they presented, they actually did. So let me bring back in our expert forensic death investigator, Joseph Scott Morgan. And tell me, Joseph Scott Morgan, do you find that typically in an investigation, a person of interest is identified and that is the person of interest for the course of the actual collection of evidence and investigation?
That's going to be case dependent, Ash. The reason is that sometimes you're going to have cases where you have a specific offender that has been arrested at the scene, and that's going to put you on the trail immediately. But for many of these cases, you're dealing with just a shot in the dark. You want to collect it. You know, as he said, they start out in kind of a general way where they're collecting as much evidence as they possibly can, and they don't know what is going to be of value at any particular time, and that's the way you need to go into any particular case. You assume that everything has value to it moving forward, and then you narrow your scope. In a case like this, where they were looking hard at someone to begin with, they focus solely, or at least greatly, on that individual. And sometimes this can lead us down roads that are kind of dangerous, can it? Because we're distracted by other things in by that individual and not paying attention to other things in our investigative environment.
So take it the next step. In this particular case, we've heard testimony that there was no DNA evidence, no fingerprints on any of the clothing of the defendant, the car of the defendant, the belongings. So given all of that, do you think that this defendant being the only person of interest makes good sense Monday back quarterbacking and looking back?
Yeah, well, you know, you can't. I'm not a big fan of somebody hanging the totality of their case upon forensic evidence alone. A lot of this comes down to good old-fashioned shoe leather. What leads had the detective developed along the way? That is, when they're going out conducting interviews, when they're establishing a timeline, can they put her and him, that is the victim and the accused, in the same environment at the same time? Along the way, you hope to pick up forensic evidence along the way that is going to kind of tell the tale with a bit more clarity, but it doesn't always work out that way.
All right. So the other thing that the defense did in this case is they actually asked this witness straightforward, and here is the quote: was there any discussion about any of the police reports not being produced? And his answer was no, not at all. So as we had discussed, the second appeal was overturned for those grounds. We're going to take a short break, but we hope that you will come back and join us for more live testimony in Law and Crime. We are continuing to listen to the live coverage of the state of Iowa versus Stanley Liggins. And Joseph Scott Morgan, our expert forensic investigator, I want to turn it back to you. Tell me, why was it crucial or important that the defense is asking about specifically how much gas can be held in the gas can that was found during the course of this investigation?
Yeah, I think that what's significant about this, Ash, is they want to know how much was potentially used. Also, we go back to the boyfriend. I'm sorry, the girlfriend of Liggins. They asked her to identify this gas can in court. And I think they asked her some pretty specific questions as well. So it's all about how much gas was applied to try to get rid of this young girl's body. How much had it previously contained? Had he gone out and purchased more gasoline, or is this gas that was pre-existing? And so, one other thing that it also goes to is the care with which the technician or the criminalist takes in measuring the amount that they're testing. How much is there? If you can't give a specific amount, that goes to, you know, how focused were you on the testing? And I think that's one of the issues that the defense is raising here.
All right, and I think the defense is doing a really good job in this case of showing all the things that were not tested, were not considered. The shoes that I already mentioned from two other individuals that this witness says, no, we never received those, we never tested those. There was also some information about other individuals or items found at Rock Island that were never received and never tested. So we're going to stay tuned with the live testimony in this case again, and he's been on the stand all day, the criminalist. So we're going to continue with his testimony after this short break. Please stay with us on Law and Crime. Joseph Scott Morgan has been joining us to analyze this trial, and I'd like to turn it over to you. I know that you have to sign off. We have about a minute, but tell me, we were talking on a break about exculpatory evidence and how difficult it might be for a defendant to challenge all of the evidence in terms of DNA testing and fingerprinting. Tell me about that and why it would be such an expense or why it may not be as likely.
Yeah, let's first take into consideration the sheer weight that the state brings to this. They have their own crime lab, and that consists of a lot of highly trained experts that the police can bring to bear in a case like this. Everybody from blood spatter to hair to soil to tire tracks to everything, and in cases involving firearms, ballistics.
Okay, and I'm going to stop you there, Joe Scott, just because we do have a break and we're going to be returning to trial. Thank you for joining us, and please have join us with the live trial as soon as we take this very short break on Law and Crime.